I want to welcome you to the Pro Mindset Podcast. The Pro Mindset Podcast is all about diving into the headspace that results in championship performance. High-performing athletes, winners, have this mental flow and have a positive headspace for their performances and success. Join me, Craig Doman, sports attorney and NFL agent, on this podcast. I will interview pro athletes, college athletes, football coaches, and sports personalities. Together, we can discover how you can get in the flow and have your own pro mindset.
So today on Pro Mindset, we have as a special guest one of my former college roommates, Gary Sobba. Gary is currently the executive director of the Wells Fargo PGA Golf Tournament in Charlotte, North Carolina. And Gary's had a decorated sports business career at the college level with Learfield, and now he's in the PGA. Gary, welcome to the show.
I'm glad to be on, Craig. Thanks for calling.
Okay, so Gary, being in the position that you're in, why don't you describe for our audience, what is your current position with the PGA and with the Wells Fargo event?
Yeah, I'm the tournament director for the Wells Fargo Championship, which is an event in Charlotte, North Carolina. We actually work for a charity. All the PGA events, the host organization in each community, whether you're at the Waste Management, whether you're at the Dale Match Play, whether you're at the Genesis, you have a local organization that's a 501c3, and that group here is Champions for Education. And when the tournament comes to town, we put on from soup to nuts all aspects of a PGA event. So in kind of a nutshell, that's what I do.
Okay, so let's go back prior to that.
I spent about 25 years in college athletics, started on within the athletic department side at Wichita State in Houston. And then school started to outsource their marketing rights in the mid-'90s, and I bundled their rights. And the schools found that private enterprise could, for a variety of reasons, could generate more dollars for athletics departments than what they had it internally. So for 15 years, I ran for the University of North Carolina their Tar Heel Sports Marketing, which was the multimedia rights holder. And when I say multimedia rights, that's if you walk into a stadium, all the signage, if you listen to radio broadcasts or coaches' shows or on the internet, the websites, all those things, we packaged those up for sponsors. So for 15 years, I did that in Chapel Hill. And then I also negotiated media rights deals for Learfield Sports out of Dallas for about 2.5 years prior to coming here.
Awesome. Okay. So the title of the podcast is Pro Mindset. And what it's about is, the elite performers have, like Michael Jordan, LeBron, some of those kind of guys, Tom Brady, they have a different perspective on their game. When you look at the PGA, what do you see as the difference from the vantage point that you have in dealing with the players that come to your event? Do you notice a difference between the elite guys and the rest, or they all look the same?
Well, it's a really good and fair question. And when I'm out on the tour, for instance, our event will have 156 golfers. And you'll have anywhere from a Tiger Woods, Rory McIlroy to a guy who, I'm going to use an example. The final guy in our field a year ago was the guy named Brendan Todd. Brendan Todd was given an exemption. He was from Raleigh in the area, Green Hope High School, University of Georgia, and so forth. And I'll come back to him. But if you were on the range and if you knew golf, you'd sit behind these guys. They almost all hit it the same. Tiger might hit a little further, Dustin Johnson, Cameron Champ. But you sit back there and the swings just look very similar, ball flight similar. The real difference is who makes the most putts, and it's confidence. And that's when you look at 0.1 strokes per round over the course of 4 days, all of a sudden half a stroke, but, a stroke per tournament leaves a significant difference in dollars. So it's just amazing the guys that are hitting it well and the guys that can get up and down and putt it well. And I would tend to say that's confidence. Now, let me back up to the Brendan Todd issue. You've got Tiger in the field, you've got Rory, but Brendan Todd, 156 and 156, actually made the cut here, cashed nearly $100,000. Well, this is the same Brendan Todd that last fall, this was last May in Charlotte, last fall nearly won 3 consecutive events on the PGA Tour. So here's a guy who literally was off the tour, needed an exemption, and then wins 3 consecutive events. So the difference, and this is a long-winded answer, the difference between great and mediocre is so infinitesimally small, and it's really confidence, Craig.
Okay, so let's dive into what confidence means to you. When you say confidence, does that mean belief in themselves regardless of the circumstances? Does that mean a more intense belief that they can do it under pressure? What does that mean to you?
I think it can mean a lot of things. I think one, self-belief, and you know, I was watching Gary Woodland on the Faraday this week, and he talked about, you know, he always believed he could be the best. He just believed in his heart he could do it. And if you don't believe, you know, and you just got to believe that, hey, I'm out here, I'm more athletic, I'm a better putter, I'm a better ball striker. Because if you're just, you know, you're trying to make cuts and try, it's hard to hang. You have to either feel like I'm a better putter, I'm a better ball striker, I'm one thing better, I have a better short game, because you've got to be able to survive out here. And golf, unlike a lot of sports, team sports, I mean, you're exposed. It's just you, and you got to produce. And I think that's one of the things I admire, you know, watching a guy come down 16, 17, 18. We had a first-time winner here last year with Max Homa, with 2 top 10 in the world, Rory McIlroy and Justin Rose, breathing down his throat, and watching a guy that, you know, is in the zone, goes in the zone, is able to win. You know, that's pretty impressive stuff. I find that very, very interesting and novel, how confidence can lead to success.
Okay, so you used the word zone, in the zone. You know, some people call it in the flow, and you've been an athlete, you're a golfer, you've been in the zone. You've gone on streaks of, you know, birdieing 5 holes in a row, things like that. What do athletes, and especially golfers, do when they get there? How do they get there? How do they stay there? And what's going on when they're in the zone?
Well, I think at that time there's almost internal confidence. It's almost like nothing bothers you. Gary Woodland's caddy told me last year on the final round, and actually the week at Pebble Beach, and you know Gary from a small town, Topeka, Kansas, and you know, to win the U.S. Open at Pebble Beach. I mean, that's just kind of, it's an iconic location. But his caddy told me Gary was in the zone, nothing bothered him, and he just had that inner confidence. And it's very few times, I think, I guess Michael Jordan probably got there every game he needed to, but I think for the really good athlete, you don't get there frequently. And when you do, it's just, you know, your focus is so surreal that nothing bothers you, and you can play at a higher level.
Well, I think a lot of times when you're in the zone, things always look good. You see the competition with the filter. Even when you get on the green, is it fair to say that when you're in the zone, you can see the line? It's not a faint line, it's a bold line, and then the cup looks huge.
Gosh, that just doesn't happen very often for me. I need that to happen more frequently.
But isn't it true though? When you're really feeling it, you see things more clearly than when you're not.
Oh, I don't think there's any question about that. And zone focus, surreal, you know, those things. When you're hot, you know, it's just same thing as a basketball shooter. Boy, when you know, if you make 3 in a row, chances are you feel good about the 4th one. So I think putting in golf is very, very similar. There are a lot of outside forces, wind, you know, conditions, so forth, that can affect the golfer. That I find that's, you know, you look at a tennis and a golf, although tennis has different surfaces, golf every day, the golf course changes. And that's what I find so novel. These guys have got to go from week to week to different courses and play different conditions. And so they're just the best in the world.
So, not that you know, but if you were to guess, what do you think a top 10 PGA golfer's pre-swing thought process looks like?
You're asking a hard question. I don't know that. And I talked to a lot of the teachers, but I would guess they probably have very, you know, maybe 1, 2, or 3 swing thoughts. I think they probably try to clear their mind. You know, unfortunately, I've got 153 swing thoughts, and
yeah.
You know, but I think, you know, there's their key points. You know, Norman used to talk about takeaway, and they all have their checkpoints. But I also think they want a clear mind, and in some respects, some are mechanical, but you know, some people are athletic, and they want to let their athleticism take over.
Well, I think one of the things that I was just having this conversation with my son about golf and playing quarterback yesterday is that, you know, when you're a quarterback and you bring the ball back to the trigger point, it's autopilot. There is not a quarterback in America that plays high school, college, or pro that tries to aim the ball, that tries to do something certain, you know, some technique or any type of physical mechanism when they're throwing the ball. They just let it go. And I think the thing about golf that tricks up a lot of guys, especially amateurs, is they think too much through the swing. So when you're suggesting that the swing, the pre-swing thought process might be clearing their mind, that is absolutely probably true, because without a clear mind, you can't just let it go.
I don't think there's any question about that, and athletes, especially football players and so forth, in pressure time, you just got to play. You absolutely have to play. And golfers, and I've been told this by several guys who are in the hunt on the back nine of the Masters, you really don't feel, when you say you use the word autopilot, I mean, you're almost having an out-of-body experience. You don't have that muscle memory is what you're relying on. All the thousands of practice shots, because the pressure is at such a level. You just got to, in some respects, react and execute. And when your body, when you don't feel you're out of body when you're leading the Masters. And again, I've had several pros tell me that it's nothing like they've ever seen before. And you got to rely on the repetition and the work that got you there.
No question. No question. Well, one of the things that I've done is I've done studies on what makes a championship event different than a regular season event. So like in golf, that's just a regular run-of-the-mill tournament compared to the Masters or the U.S. Open or something, one of the big four. And in football, it's a Super Bowl compared to like a September regular season game. And the answer is nothing except the accolades and outcome that flow naturally from winning, or the disappointments that flow naturally from losing. The game's the same. The ball's the same size. I mean, it's the same game in golf, same game in football. And so I think what happens to a lot of guys that choke is they think it's different. When if you're in a 199-yard par 3 in the Masters with undulating greens and all this fancy stuff, it's still golf. It's still a par 3. It just, hey, maybe if you make that, you get a birdie or a par, you might end up winning a lot of money and get a green jacket.
Well, it is. Pressure is an interesting thing. Pressure, with any individual, whether it's a football player or a golfer. In football, sometimes you can't see the pressure, but in golf, you can almost feel the pressure. Pressure does different things to different people, and in all the sports, especially individual sports, I think most people say the back nine of the Masters, at least in pro sports, for an individual probably has the greatest amount of pressure ever. So even the greatest of athletes have never experienced this. They just haven't. So until you get there several times, usually you've got to be able to, whether it's through your breathing, whether it's through your walking, you've got to be able to slow your body down. And even Harold Varner, Harold Varner on the tour was playing in the PGA 2 years ago it was a year ago, up in New York. I'm joking on the course, and he told me, Gary, he goes, I always warm up in 45 minutes. I hit this. He goes, for whatever reason, I couldn't slow my body down, and I warmed up in like 36 minutes. And he goes, I knew it. I knew what I was doing, but, I just had not been there and done that. So it's interesting how pressure affects even the great players.
Oh, no doubt. No doubt. There is no doubt. I mean, in the history of sports and all different sports, there's multitudes of moments of guys choking, and it's because they let pressure get to them.
And it was the Bethpage Black course. It was actually the golf course. He told me about that. He was playing the PGA, and I believe he was playing with Brooks Koepka.
Gotcha. Okay, let's shift gears. Let's go back to your world at North Carolina and Chapel Hill. You're probably had a good relationship with Larry Fedora, Roy Williams, and guys in those positions. What did you see, from a guy like Roy that enabled him to, kill it at University of Kansas, go back to his alma mater in North Carolina, and, continue what Dean Smith started?
Yeah, and I think all coaches are like snowflakes. They're all a little bit different, but the great coaches, and Roy Williams is one, because I think Roy's like the consummate. He doesn't have any weaknesses. He's really good at everything. But the best coaches I've been around are really smart individuals. I mean, they're just smart, and they get it, and they're analytical. One of my mentors is a guy named Bill Yeoman, who was the legendary football coach and invented the veer option in Houston. And Veer, he was a football coach. His brother was a doctor from Harvard, and Bill had a higher IQ. So literally in any business, in any sport, Dean Smith was unbelievably intelligent, and good coaches that know how to convey and know how to teach. It really comes down to, like in any business, the smarter you are, the better chance you have. And I look at Coach Williams. He's extremely intelligent, extremely competitive. You got to have a competitive drive and can convey and relate to kids. And those are really, to me, critical factors: intelligence, competitiveness, and their ability to communicate.
Okay, so let's talk about intelligence, because just by itself, you can be really smart, but it's the application of that intelligence to your sport and to your team or to your players. How does guys like Roy and other great coaches you've been around, what do you see as like the secret sauce they have with their relationships with their players?
Well, they're all different. It's hard to really, compare coaches, but I would say most of them understand who they are, understand their strengths, their weaknesses, and if they believe in a plan or a philosophy, they stick to it. I know Coach Williams is always, from recruiting, he's always tried to develop a relationship with a kid or his high school coach, and typically if he had to go a different route, he might say no to that recruit. That's just who he is. So he's been steadfast in his beliefs, and they've worked unbelievably well for a number of years. So, but I've worked with the national championship coach at Wichita State, Gene Stevenson, far different, or Bill Yeoman. So they're all very different, but their competitiveness and their work ethic. Let me digress to Coach Williams. He always talks about, if you skip a day recruiting, it's like skipping a day shaving. Everyone will notice. He literally outworks everybody, and I found that to be, in my career, very critical. Is that if somebody else is out taking a day to play golf on a recruiting calendar day, boy, if I'm not, I feel like I've got a competitive advantage, which kind of leads back to that confidence piece. I'm outworking you. I got a better chance to win.
Well, I think there's like a jury inside everybody's brain that if you deserve it and you've earned it and you feel more entitled for it, that it's easier for it to happen, and it just shows up, it manifests itself. And so if you feel guilty as a human for not doing what you should have did, you're less likely to be successful.
Well, I think frauds get exposed, and especially that level. When you're competing at the highest level, frauds are going to get exposed. And if you're not, you don't have to win national titles, but the fact you're getting there, you're really, really accomplished. You're watching replays right now in because of unfortunately what's going on in our country. And I happened to watch the end of Carolina Villanova 2 days ago, and Villanova won on the last second buzzer beater and so forth. Well, and now the fact that it is on tape, Carolina won the next year. Well, I can only imagine how many coaches, if that was their only trip to the Final Four and they lost, how just absolutely devastating that would be for a coach. But Coach Williams had already won 2 national titles, and he wins the next year. His belief in his system, while I'm certain he was just heartbroken, but the fact that he challenged his team and they came back to win the next year, it shows about the resiliency and the toughness of those guys. We haven't talked toughness, but the really good ones are tougher than nails. I think that's one of the biggest things. Go back to confidence, but go back to inner belief, faith, and toughness. But the difference between winning and losing in college athletics is, it is a whisker, and those mentally tough win.
I agree with that. I think from a coaching standpoint, process is pretty important, and Roy Williams has to have an excellent process, because it doesn't matter the names on the back of the jerseys with his players. He still gets similar results year in, year out. And yes, you're going to have an outlier year from time to time, like perhaps they had this year. But when you've got an outstanding process, you either win most of the time, or if your process isn't good, you're average, and maybe you're not even a head coach anymore. So I think from a coach perspective, process is very important. And then from a kind of connecting back to what you talked about with respect to toughness, NFL coaches, NFL scouts talk about it all the time. You're gonna get smacked in the mouth. What's going to be your response? You're going to fail. What's going to be your response? Mental toughness is a prime time ingredient for successful NFL guys. Totally agree.
You got 100 guys that can run a 4.5 or 4.4 faster. Cornerback's probably the position in the NFL How many 4-5 guys are there out there?
All day long.
What makes guys special? And it's not just skill set. It's hey, do they have a short memory? And are they tough as nails? And those guys that are getting paid big dollars.
Yeah. So let's kind of bounce around to, with the virus going on right now and the Final Four and March Madness being canceled. What's your opinion about, should they name the number one team the national champion, or what's your perspective on that? You've been in college sports, like you said, 2.5 decades.
Well, as a two-time alum of Kansas and talking to alum of Kansas, the University of Kansas should absolutely be named, since they ended up consensus number one, they absolutely should be named the national champion.
Rock Chalk Jayhawk right there, Gary. That's what I'm saying.
Let's get that real clear.
Validate that for me right now. We don't have a football team, but hey, we got a basketball program.
Put that banner in the rafters, and I guarantee you Coach Self will. But
hey, we may cheat with the best of them, but dang it, we got a good b-ball team.
No comment. But it is a weird time in the world, isn't it? Oh my gosh, and for the youngsters that have never been through this, we've never been through this. And
it is painful, and every day it seems like the screws are getting tightened all over the nation, and obviously I'm not really paying attention what's going on globally except for statistics, but it's like more and more governors and mayors are issuing orders of stay home. And I think at some point in time, people are going to go crazy. But I think.
Well, I already have. I'm day 4 of socialization or social distancing, and I've gone super nuts. So
let's go to your role as executive director of the Wells Fargo Championship. What is the coolest thing you get to do in your job that maybe when you were sitting in Lawrence, Kansas as a young, dumb, college kid, you never dreamed you'd get a chance to do?
Oh gosh, there's so many things, but it's not even something I even dreamed of growing up. I didn't think about it. I had loved golf. My brother was a state champion, and obviously I could play, but never dreamed about getting in the golf business. But I'll tell you a couple of stories. I'll go out and recruit 4 or 5 times a year, and one of the best events to recruit is the Hero, which is Tiger Woods' classic in the Bahamas right after Thanksgiving. And it's if I told you 18 of the top 30 golfers in the world there, I mean, it's big names. And I happen to get to know a little bit Tiger Woods' caddy and one of his managers, and I'm talking to them on the green, and all of a sudden I kind of see out of the corner of my eye walking towards me is Tiger Woods, and he sticks out his hand to shake my hand and introduce himself as Tiger Woods. And Lord knows I knew who he was. And I said, "Hi, I'm Gary Sobba." And I'm just thinking internally, Gary, don't do something totally stupid right now. And so just some experiences that you meet people and you're on the inner circle with watching Rory McIlroy or talking to him for a few seconds. And I would tell you one of the things that people need to know is what class young individuals they are. There are not bad guys on the tour. Yeah, there's always one, like anything, but I mean the percentage is amazingly small. We should be so proud of what these, I'll call young golfers are doing, these young professionals. They handle themselves well, they carry themselves well, but I've just been able to be close to a lot of people, and it's just part of the job.
Isn't it fair to say, I mean, you grew up in a small town, I did too, and, everybody puts their pants on the same way, and even the most successful people in their industries, whether it's PGA golfers in golf or, NFL all-pros in football, they're just like us. They really are just like us. They just have an innate ability to perform at their craft at the highest level of anybody on the planet.
Very much so. And I don't think a lot of people know the sacrifice they all make, to go out there and, a golfer, while you're on TV on Saturday, Sunday, it's a very nomadic lifestyle. And if you don't play, you don't make money. You've got to make cuts. So week to week, I mean, you're flying to a new location. You're typically by yourself. You might have your teacher at a new hotel. You're checking in. You're going out. You're trying to really, these guys are friends. You're trying to beat a lot of your friends' brains in to go make money. But then you go do it the next week. And if you miss cuts, and there's a lot of guys, it's easy. The top 25 guys on the tour you can name. But when you get on past that, And if I told you 150 through 1,000, that level, oh my gosh, the difference is not that far. And, you just got to you start making putts and get confidence. And it's just amazing how many great golfers there are that can't even come close to the tour. And then you take the guys that now are inside the top 25. They're the best in the world. But the sacrifices they've had to go to get there are pretty immense.
Well, I would agree with that. And I don't know any pro golfers at the moment, but I can tell you from the NFL that you have, Rob Ninkovich, in my podcast interview with him, shared with me that he had football on the brain from middle school on. And all he thought about was football. And everything that he did was always in alignment with his dream of playing in the NFL. And when he made it to the NFL, he still didn't take it for granted. He pretty much lived in his car for the first couple of years. He just didn't want to believe he was there. It wasn't until he was in the league 8 or 9 years and he made a lot of money and had a couple Super Bowl rings that he really kind of enjoyed the spoils of being in the NFL. And I think that single-mindedness that he took is a must-have for anybody that wants to be the best in the world at anything.
No question. They have great internal drive, focus, great competitiveness, all those things. And you call single-mindedness, I totally agree. I happened to have the opportunity to play with Coach Williams and Coach Smith before Coach Smith passed. And, Craig, I'm a little overly competitive. But I can tell you in my group, and there was another coach, I was the fourth most competitive guy in my group. And at that time, I no longer felt guilty about always being competitive because Coach Smith and Coach Williams were 10 times more competitive than I was. And my friends would tell you I'm 10 times more competitive than anybody they've ever met. But there is a level there that the competitive drive of those guys is off the charts.
Off the charts competitive and transferable, because they were able to take it from basketball to the golf course. And I feel like guys that are ultra competitive, they do it in the weight room. They do it on the putting green. They do it in the sand pit. They do it everywhere. They do it when they're playing poker on the 19th hole. They do it all the time. They can't turn it off. And if they learn how to turn it off, they may not be able to turn it back on.
I think we've seen that a lot when as guys get older and they lose some of the competitive edge, and it may be a mental edge. Coach Williams, you've heard say the story a lot of times with Michael Jordan. He said, "Not only was our best player, he was our hardest worker." And I think that's what makes it special when they're really good teams. When you're, if your best player is your hardest worker, boy, it makes it a lot easier for coach to discipline the rest of the way down.
No doubt about it. And those are usually championship teams.
No question about that. And I always think that, one of the keys in life is, regardless of how gifted you are, can you max your gifts? Some just aren't as gifted as others, but can you really hit your zenith? Can you really maximize the I call it the God gifts that are given to you, and do that? To me, that's the ultimate. When you are maximizing your abilities and you're working at your absolute peak to be able to do that. To me, that should be anybody's goal. In life, in terms of, you're given X amount of brain power and X amount of athletic skills and so forth. And certainly we're talking about athletics here, but I think it also qualifies to business.
It totally does. And one of the things I talk to my clients about is, can you maximize your God-given ability? And then can you use your God-given mind to help you perform at a higher level than the ability you actually have? And when guys can do that, usually something special happens. Nobody in high school thought they'd even play college, and they end up playing in the pros. It's because of the mental part that got them over the hump.
No question. And I think that's also good coaching. I think the good coaches out there can make you play at a level and take you to a level that you never dreamed of playing. And I think that's one of the key things that, I think particularly in football, can you make that guy really better than he actually is? And I think the great coaches can do that.
Okay, so let's shift to the Chiefs. You've been a longtime Chiefs fan, and your team, first time in 50 years, gets back to the Super Bowl. What do you like about the Chiefs organization? Their roster composition, they're the face of the franchise, maybe the face of the league.
Well, I tell you it was, and I was there on that Sunday night in Miami, and had refused to go to the Super Bowl until the Chiefs were actually there. But I think there's a lot of pieces to talk about. Yeah, you can start with Patrick Mahomes, face of the league. It appears to me he is a better leader and so forth than he is a player, and he's the best player in the league. But, just seeing some behind-the-scenes clips, he believes in himself and the team believes in him. But I think, when you put that roster together, you and I have had this conversation, they went from a 3-4 to a 4-3. And they went from, if they're not offside, they might have won the year before too, because they've been in the Super Bowl if D Ford wasn't offsides and they intercept the pass. But going from a 3-4 to a 4-3 defense, that is different players. And so for the GM to be able to go out and, he made about 6 different transactions to make all that work. That's hard to do. And so I look in 1 year making that transformation. Brett Veach deserves a lot of the credit. And then, it's obviously Andy Reid. I mean, he's just a phenomenal coach. But you look at all the pieces and how they put it together, and now the salary cap issues. I just think you look at a winning organization when you've got that quarterback, especially under a rookie contract. That's how you make hay in that league.
No doubt. And I think the other thing that happens is when you got a guy like Patrick Mahomes that has the skill set that he has and the style of play that he has, and he gets so much recognition and notoriety for throwing the ball left-handed, underhanded, blind passes, all these types of things. But you hit the nail on the head. I think the differentiator for him is his leadership, his willpower, his confidence, his belief in the team, not in him, because he builds up that offense. And I think it's contagious. I would love to see Travis Kelce's persona before Mahomes was playing, because those guys are like blood brothers. And you've got a bunch of guys on that offense and that whole organization. They're mirroring Mahomes' confidence. And it's, the high tide rises all boats. I feel like Patrick Mahomes has that personality that he's raising the tide, and it's making everybody better.
No,
and
that's well said. Very well said.
And it's not about the left-handed passes. Those are cool. Those are SportsCenter highlights. It's about the commentary that you saw behind the scenes, when they're down 14 in this game and 10 in that game and so on and so forth, 24 in another game, and they come back and win.
Well, his confidence he rubs off, and the rest of the team knows we've got the best player in the league. And when he believes that and the rest of the team believes that, you got a heck of a chance. If you don't turn the ball over and so forth, you literally, every time you have the ball, you've got a reasonable chance to score. And in fact, they scored 7 consecutive times, I believe, against Houston, when they're down 24-0, something like that. And when, if I recall, 51-31, 51-24, something like that. So that's real. And to think these are the best of the best. I mean, these are the supreme athletes in the world. And you got one player that's simply better than everybody else. That just doesn't happen very often.
No doubt. Okay, so shifting gears, let's talk about amateur sports at the college level with the money that the coaches are making, the TV dollars the conferences are bringing in, and the players kind of starting to galvanize and unionize and lobby for their piece of the pie. How do you see, you've been 25 years in college sports. How do you see this thing playing out?
I don't have a crystal ball on this, but I've seen college athletics first of all, it's what a wonderful, wonderful business. What a wonderful, opportunity for young student athletes and young, individuals not only get a great education, but be able to compete at the highest level. So, and that's Division I, certainly have Division II, Division III as well. So to me, athletics across the board are wonderful for life. But I think there's right now there's some serious hurdles in college athletics, and I was at one point in my life never for paying the players, and of course then coaches' salaries got so high that you basically had to give them cost of tuition. The NIL, I'm not certain that there's 18, 19-year-olds are going to change people's buying patterns. Certainly using a Zion Williamson, yeah, he probably could, but there aren't many like him. So I'm kind of anxious to see where that goes. But I'm probably more concerned about the business of college athletics, because when you look at the payment to coaches to not coach last year, it was over $100 million. You've got agents that create, in some respects, it may be real, but sometimes almost fake competition in the marketplace. And presidents and athletic directors feel almost forced to give contracts and guaranteed contracts that turn around and 2 years later might bite them in the rear end. Those are things that scare me about the business, paying a little over $100 million for coaches to sit on the sidelines. Don't have the answer for that because unilaterally you can't change it. But collectively, the marketplace it's got to change.
I got to agree with you on this one because I really feel like the agent's expertise in manipulating the media, utilizing the media, maximizing leverage for their client is superior to the AD's ability to sift through what's real and what's not. And I feel like, just look at Rick George at Colorado in my home state with Mike McIntyre, give him a nice deal, and he's gone a year later. That happens over and over and over again.
It happens time and time again. And most ADs are really smart people. They're not unintelligible people, but many times there are factors beyond their control. It could be boosters, could be a head coach's relationship with boosters, could be presidents making the call. So there's a lot of variables in play that, normal business you wouldn't have to, you don't have to factor in. But the market certainly has swayed to the way the advantage is on the side of the agent. And I think college athletics has got to come to grips to that to be able to develop a true market, not this kind of fictitious market controlled. You call it manipulate the media. That is manipulate the media, and you create demand or artificial demand that may not be there.
No doubt about it. And I also think they need to have normal mechanisms that are in professional sports. Coaches are professional athletes of sorts because they're getting compensated for their performance, their success. And when they don't perform or their team doesn't perform or something goes sideways and they get let go, they still get paid. So there needs to be more sophisticated components in their contracts. There should be de-escalators in their contracts. And hey, you know what? If you if you don't win 3 conference games, or you can't, you go 7 years in a row without beating a arch rival that might be like pivot points, you're going to take a pay cut. And you ought to be glad. You got to be glad to take the pay cut because short of the pay cut, you're getting your pink slip.
I couldn't agree with you more, but you've got natural market forces, and unilaterally it's hard to go against those things. I agree. It should be, hey, you win 9 games, you should be making a lot more than you win 6 than if you're winning 3. But these guaranteed dollars, that now I think the term's as big as the issue as the dollars. And some of these almost have an evergreen clause. They're almost automatic rollovers. But goodness gracious, when we were in college athletics, we didn't have a 5-second contract. And to give guys 7-8 years that are commanding, $7, $8, $9 million, and we're depending on where they are in their life, their work ethic might change. I mean, I think it's been found true and time again that hey, you're later in life, you can sign a long-term deal. Sometimes you can get comfortable. And that may not be an age thing, but it's just a comfort thing.
Well, there's no doubt that money doesn't matter your age. Once you get more money than you need and more money than maybe you even dreamed of, guys get soft. So here's kind of my last question. What did I not ask you that you would have liked me to ask you?
Talk about passion.
Okay. Gary, I'm just going to share with you what I've learned from reverse engineering, elite performers. They believe in themselves. You already talked about that. They're passionate about what they do. They are motivated. That's the thinking patterns of every single successful person I know, regardless of whether they're a sports performer or not. And if you don't believe in yourself, everybody else reflects that lack of belief. If you're not passionate, you're not going to be successful. But if you are passionate, what I see happening a lot is sometimes other passions surpass their primary passion. And when that happens, that's when their career starts going south. And then they have to be motivated. Share with us your perspective on what passion means to you in competition.
Well, I think, and I'll use it in business and life, those that are passionate about what they do are going to be more driven to do it. I've really, honestly, I hate to say this, but I've never really had to work a day in my life because I've been in college sports and golf and so forth. Yeah, there's a lot of pressure and there's a lot of work, but literally getting out of bed in the morning to go to work. And I think the great athletes, they are passionate about what they do. And their self-drive is it's fundamentally it's because of when they wake up in the morning, they want to be the best. So they found a career, they found a sport, they found, whether it's individual or team, something they love doing. And I think the passion drives everything we've talked about confidence, but, the ability to get out there and work the hardest. Passion could be somewhat described as work ethic as well. Those who are gifted, but then work the hardest, then you add the intelligence piece, at the highest level, they work the hardest, they're the most gifted, and they're the smartest. And, I think that's pretty true across the board.
How do you see that playing out on a golf tournament, on a 4-day weekend on the PGA Tour?
Oh gosh, I would use last year's Masters as an example. You come to number 12 and Tiger Woods, who's won there several times, but even at that point, I'm guessing is nervous. But he watched a couple of star players, Francesco Molinari. He watched Tony Finau. Watched a couple of guys hit into the water on number 12. Well, he's been there before, and that passion and drive and intelligence, he hit left on 12 to a much safer location, and all of a sudden he's in the lead. I thought that was one great example where, experience probably would maybe more so than passion, but experience and intelligence really, went in the golf tournament right there.
Okay, so you just gave an example of a pivot point for Tiger in that tournament on that hole, doing something that the other guys weren't doing to get a different result because he didn't want to end up in the water as well. What do you see now? Let's expand it from a tournament to a career. What do you see the natural pivot points are for people to sustain success? Because in all sports, you have that one-year wonder. What was the dude's name for the White Sox? Fidrich? I think he was
Detroit. Mark the Bird Fidrich. Detroit Tiger.
Detroit Tiger. Okay.
He patted the mound down.
Yeah. So he did it 1 year.
20-game winner.
RG3 did it for 1 year in Washington, was Rookie of the Year, and then disappeared. What does it take for a guy or girl to sustain career success?
Well, there can be many things. And many times at that level, you have to worry about injuries. Sometimes people's body, Mark Bird, I think he blew out his shoulder or his elbow. And, RG3, another example, he said, he may not have the body type, but he's had a number of injuries. So that's the hard part. Can your body withstand, what you're trying to do? So, and when you do get injured, boy, that leads to confidence, which leads to working harder, which leads to, can lead to injury again. And so many times there's that, but to be able to sustain it, I always feel like it's harder to sustain than to build. To me, that's when it's special. And you've had to have that passion to be able to achieve at the highest level, and the confidence then to stay there, and the work ethic, to do both those things. So I think it's probably different for everyone. But when you're at that level, I've always worked a lot harder when I was at the top than when I was working my way to the top, just because it's harder for me to keep a great tournament going and tweak it and make it better. So you got to continue to. If you were 100% last year, how do you work 102? And I know I'm using an analogy that's not real, but how do you stay at the top and work even harder?
Well, I don't doubt that, and I agree with that. And I would just say that the team and the coach that popped in my head while you were describing that was Belichick and the Patriots, because it is really, really hard to get to the Super Bowl and win a Super Bowl, but it's harder to stay there. That's why there's only a handful of dynasties in the NFL in the history of the 100 years. And, it'll be interesting to see with the Chiefs if they have the ability to get back in 2020 or 2021. Because, with the Patriots, they've won the AFC East like 15 consecutive years.
That conference is terrible, Craig. AFC West is hard.
Well, there are probably some truth to that, but here's the deal: 15 years in a row.
Okay, let's see this year. Let's see with Brady gone. Let's see what happens. I'm gonna take the 15 years tops, and I'm probably wrong.
I think you're right. I'm betting on the Bills. I think everybody's going to bet on the Bills. I think they've got a great GM, Brandon Beane, that came from the Carolina Panthers. He's doing a great job putting the pieces of the puzzle together.
He really has.
They're making some good moves, and when you got a quarterback like Josh Allen, you got to give him some weapons. They bring in Diggs. They're doing some things. They're going to continue to build through the draft. They have to. If you don't surround the quarterback, the franchise quarterback, who might end up being the number one guy in that whole draft class, and some people might argue it's Lamar Jackson or somebody else. But I think over the long haul, Josh Allen could be that guy.
He's been pretty good. You follow it closer than I do, but you know the mechanics of salary cap and those type things in that league that, to have sustainability, especially when you win, your assets, your players are valued more highly, and you lose those to free agency. So to continue then and backfill with more talent, and of course Brady has been your mainstay there forever, but I mean they've won with average receivers, they've won with great receivers, they've always historically had a great defense, but to be able to maneuver around the salary cap and with the addition of assets and depletion of assets, I think that's the most impressive thing.
Well, one of the things that the Patriots have done that a lot of people don't realize is they have manufactured draft capital better than any team in the NFL. And the way you can manufacture it is by getting early compensatory picks, starting in the third round, starting with the 97th pick. And the Patriots probably lead the NFL with third round compensatory picks, and they know when to bring guys in late before they become free agents, let them go. They're long in the tooth, and then they get a third round pick as compensation for losing that player. They've done that repeatedly. And so I think the art of staying at the top is every single way you can acquire talent, retain talent, you have to do it. Free agency, getting the second wave of guys that are maybe, the Rodney Harrisons of the world that maybe are past their prime that come in and just kill it for the Patriots back in the day. That's what the Bills are going to have to do if they want to get to the top and stay there.
No, I agree with you. The Chiefs this year right now would qualify for 2 compensatory picks. He's the same way. Sign guys 1 or 2 years and then let them leave your roster. And, if they've achieved well, they typically get overpaid coming from a winner. And that's when you pick up those third round picks. And, then you're talking about a much lower salary structure.
No doubt. Well, Gary Sobba, Wells Fargo Championship, what's going to happen with your tournament? When's it regularly scheduled, and what are you guys going to do?
Well, we are for the first week of May, and the tour has already postponed, or I should say canceled, all the tournaments right now through mid-May this year. I think they're hoping to start in the latter part of May. Certainly think that's still up in the air, but we now will be moving, looking towards 21, which is coincidentally for us, we actually are leaving the market. The President's Cup comes here to Charlotte in 21, so we will be going to TPC Potomac at Avenel Farms, which is in Potomac, Maryland, just outside of D.C., and that's where we'll be playing 21. So my entire sales staff will be headed up there in June, and then our rest of our staff will be going up there. And so we're getting excited and tuned up, getting ready to go for a 21 event in Washington, D.C.
Awesome. Well, Gary, I really appreciate you being on the show today. Thank you very much for your time.
Thanks, Craig.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Pro Mindset. If you enjoyed this podcast, please subscribe, rate, and review this podcast. 5 stars, of course. You can follow us on our website, ProMindsetPodcast.com, or on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook at Pro Mindset Podcast. Thank you so much for listening. We'll see you the next time.
Leftovers. Or the DMV.
Number 97.
Or house cleaning. Or
Chumba Casino always brings the fun. Play over 100 different games online for free from anywhere. You could redeem some serious prizes. ChumbaCasino.com. Live the Chumba life. No purchase necessary. Void where prohibited by law. 18+ terms and conditions apply. See website for details.